Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I am back in Athens, Georgia, in my regular filming location. I got back over the weekend, and it was a long day in the car for me and Charlene, but we made it back, and that's good, and a lot of stuff going on around here recently. Had to grade a bunch of essays, because my online summer course is wrapping up, so I graded the students' final essays, had a dentist appointment, been going to in-person yoga, which is good. So I finally am getting around to filming my July reading wrap-up and rankings video. So a little later than normal, but I'm still within the first week of August, so I think it's fine. So I have 2 books that I have not yet wrapped up, so I will talk about those first before I do my rankings. But I did read 14 books in all in the month of July, so I'll just talk about these first 2 books that I haven't already mentioned previously, and then I'll do the rankings. So let's go. So the first one is actually one that I read probably sometime around the middle of July and then just neglected to talk about because I read it pretty quickly, I think within maybe 2 days. But this was Prelude to a Riot by Zaidi. I read this as part of the 2021 Reading Women Challenge to fulfill the prompt to read a book that was longlisted for the JCB Prize, which goes to a work of contemporary Indian literature. And this was quite good. So it basically gives a lot of different perspectives, which is something I don't actually usually like in books. More on that in my next Friday Reads video, but something I don't usually like in books. But I actually enjoyed this book because it was clear to me that part of the intention was to show that tensions were aflame from multiple sides, and so hearing from different characters' perspectives was necessary in order for you to see that tensions were aflame on all sides. And there were a couple of through lines in here. It's pretty short overall. I think it's like 180 pages maybe. There were a couple of through lines. One was this newspaper that published letters to the editor from this group called the Self-Respect Forum that, sort of stood for traditional conservative values and things like that. And then there would also be poems published in the paper from anonymous poets basically making fun of the Self-Respect Forum people. And then the other through line was this history teacher named Garuda who was trying to teach his class more than just kind of basic facts about world history and about Indian history. He's trying to teach them that in order to really discern the truth about something, you have to have multiple viewpoints on it. And again, I think this is really what the book overall tries to do, and I think does pretty successfully. So those are kind of the 2 main through lines that I saw, but otherwise you have characters from a wide variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. You have migrant workers, you have middle class and upper class voices represented here, both men and women. And I think it just kind of, again, gives you this slice of what life is like and why tensions are aflame, especially between upper class land-owning individuals and poor migrant workers who, by the way, the upper class people are perfectly happy to hire and pay exploitative wages to, but they're still going to sit around and complain about how migrants are taking our jobs, which, I mean, if you live in the United States, does that sound familiar or what? But I really liked it. I found it compulsively readable, and as I said, I think I finished it like within 2 days. So really like this overall, 4 stars, would recommend if you like reading novels about contemporary India. And then the other book that I finished that I've not yet wrapped up is John Updike's Pigeon Feathers and Other Stories. I finished this on the last day of the month, I think. Ended up giving this 3.5 stars, and that's pretty standard for me with short story collections, because as with many or most short story collections I read, I liked some of the stories in here more than I liked others of them. And John Updike in this collection gives you some slice of life scenes from a marriage kind of stories, but then you also have some kind of more coming of age stories of young men, And then there are also some stories in here that have meditations on religion. I kind of appreciated those, I think, the most of the stories in here. And the ones I particularly liked were, I really liked the title story, Pigeon Feathers, which was, I think, one of the longest stories and also had this kind of religious exploration in it, which I was interested in. I also really liked A&P, which was the only story from this volume I'd read previously, and that's a coming-of-age story. And I don't usually love coming-of-age stories, but that one I think is done particularly well. And then there were a few other stories in here that I liked, The Astronomer and The Doctor's Wife, and then there's one that was written as a series of letters called Dear Alexandros that I also thought was quite good. But yeah, so I'm going to just say standard, middle of the road, kind of 3.5-star rating for this particular short story collection. If you have a particular interest in slice of life or coming of age stories, particularly for boys or young men, and or you're particularly interested in mid-century American life, I would recommend it. So yeah, that was good too. Okay, so those are the books that I had not previously wrapped up. So on to the rankings. As I said, I read 14 books the month of July, and unfortunately, the one that I liked the least this past month was The Cairo House by Samia Serageldin. I read this for my own personal Arab American literature project. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I liked that it showed me how the political landscape in Egypt changed over time, but as a novel, it didn't quite work for me because it read mainly like thinly veiled autobiography, and so not all of the elements that I really look for in a novel, like an emotional connection to the characters or character development, like not all of that stuff was there, so 3 stars. Then at number 13 was The Edwardians by Vita Sackville-West. I did this as a buddy read with Margaret Pinard, and I will link our discussion of that we did on Margaret's channel down below if you want to check that out. But basically, this is a novel that is a sort of coming-of-age story of Sebastian, who is part of a wealthy family during the Edwardian period in England, which was from 1901 to 1910, which was a time of great transition for the country, especially because it led up to not quite led up all the way to, but led up close to the beginning of World War I. And this was entertaining at parts, but there was a lot of telling, and I felt like there should have been a lot more showing. And then the other thing is that Margaret said this in our discussion, but that she said that like sort of no character in this book was without purpose. Like there was no one extraneous, like everyone who was included was like somehow tied to the plot in some way, and I just feel like in a novel that's not really necessary, so 3.25 stars. Then at number 12 was Stacey Abrams' While Justice Sleeps. This was sent to me by the lovely Sandy at Ms. Reads a Lot, so thank you again, Sandy. Gave this 3.25 stars. It's plotty, thriller, political thriller, about a woman who suddenly finds herself with a lot of power when she is given a Supreme Court justice's power of attorney after he falls into a coma. And she wasn't expecting that, and neither were this Supreme Court justice's wife or son. So then there's all this sort of stuff that happens that she has to unravel because time is running out. So again, it was plotty and fast-paced, but I didn't necessarily feel like I got to know the main character, whose name I've already forgotten because I read this at the beginning of July. But I didn't feel like I got to know her as well as I would have wanted, but I am still glad that I read this, and again, same day, I appreciate you sent this to me, so 3.25 stars. At number 11 was Emma by Jane Austen. I did this as a buddy read with Kim at Middle of the Book March and Misa at Books and Sushi. I ended up giving Emma 3.5 stars. It was the first Jane Austen novel that I'd ever read. I did feel like it dragged at points, especially in the middle, and it kind of went on for too long, and I feel like Austen should have kind of gotten to the point more quickly on some things, and I did not like Mr. Knightley, but you know, overall, I enjoyed Emma as a character, and I would definitely read another book by Jane Austen, so 3.5 stars. Then at number 10 was Pigeon Feathers, which I've already talked about, by John Updike, which I gave 3.5 stars. Then at number 9 was Christina Lamb's Our Bodies, Their Battlefields, which I gave a full review of in my BookTube Prize reading vlog for the semifinals round, which I will link down below. This was an incredibly difficult read because it is about the use of rape as a weapon of war against women and children, but I think it's also a very important read, so I gave this 3.75 stars. Number 8 was a children's book that I read while I was reading Our Bodies Are Battlefields because, you know, I couldn't just completely give up hope on life. So number 8 was Louis Sachar's Sideways Stories from Wayside School, which I gave 4 stars. This was a very cute and nostalgic for me because it was a childhood favorite children's chapter book about this school that was supposed to be built 1 story, 30 classrooms all in a row, but was accidentally built 30 stories high with 1 classroom on each story. And that first book in the series tells you all about the children and teachers who are in the 30th story of the building. Very cute, 4 stars. Number 7, oh, don't have this one either. Number 7 was the 7 Good Years, how appropriate, right? 7 Good Years by Edgar Keret. This was a memoir. I read this as an ebook from the library, so I don't have it here to hold up and show you, but this was a memoir that chronicles in little vignettes Edgar Keret's life from the birth of his son up to the death of his father, which is not a spoiler because it says it right on the back of the book. And so in each of those years you get multiple vignettes about things that are happening in his life or observations that he has about things, travels that he undertakes, etc., etc. And I really liked it. I found it very Israeli in its sensibility, which is appropriate since Edgar Keret is Israeli. So, but it was quite comical at times, but also quite poignant, and occasionally had very good observations and insights, I thought, so I gave that 4 stars. Number 6 was Yellowface, a play by David Henry Hwang. I also gave this book 4 stars. It tells a fictionalized account of the playwright who is referred to in here as DHH, of his casting of an actor whom he believes to have Asian descent in a play, but he finds out is actually totally white. And so it's a play about identity and about who gets to be American and who gets to explore their identity in the United States and who doesn't and why. So that was very smartly done. It's very comic at points, and it's a play, so it's a quick read. Would definitely recommend it if you like contemporary drama. So 4 stars. This was my 6th favorite read of the month. Then number 5 was Annie Zaidi's Prelude to a Riot, which I already talked about earlier, so I gave this 4 stars. At number 4 was Wayetu Moore's memoir, The Dragons, the Giant, the Women, which I also talked about at length in my BookTube Prize reading vlog, which again I will link down below in case you want to see that and you haven't seen it yet. But I really liked this. I felt like Moore does a good job at making an emotional connection with the reader. I felt very invested in her family's story as they try to stay out from, try to avoid getting caught in the crossfire of a military coup in Liberia, and attempted to reunite with the mother of the family who had been abroad doing graduate work in the United States. So I really liked this. 4 stars. Definitely made me interested in reading Wayetu Moore's fiction. Number 3 was the second in the Wayside School series. So this was Wayside School's Falling Down, which again I read while I was reading the book about rape for something lighter and joyful. So this is a sequel to Sideways Stories from Wayside School. I liked it even more than the first book. It was even wackier and zanier than before, because you'd already been introduced to all the characters. I feel like Louis Sachar could do more things with it, and so yeah, it was really good, 4.5 stars. Would definitely recommend it if you like children's books. And my second favorite read of the month of July was Transcript by Heimrad Backer. This is basically found poetry from the Holocaust. I thought it was excellently done, even though it is, again, like the rape book, not particularly easy read, although it's definitely easier than the rape book. But anyway, it was really good. I highly recommend it if you are a fan of poetry at all. 5 stars. And then my favorite read of the month was, of course, Louis Menand's The Free World, which, as I said when I wrapped it up, I would give more than 5 stars if that was a thing you could do on Goodreads. This was a staggering scholarly achievement about art and thought during the Cold War period, primarily in the United States, London, and Paris. It covers a vast vast array of figures, all of whom have to do with freedom and have to do with deconstructing kind of the foundations of whatever their subject is, whether that's dance with Merce Cunningham, or music with John Cage, or art with Jackson Pollock and Andy Warhol, or literary theory with Lionel Trilling, race with Richard Wright and James Baldwin, etc., etc. So yeah, really, really smartly done. It gave me so much food for thought. I'm so interested to read more about some of the figures that I read about in this book, particularly Isaiah Berlin and Hannah Arendt. Would 100% recommend it if you like intellectual history, and especially if you have an interest in nonfiction about the Cold War period. So that is everything that I read in the month of July. If you have thoughts about any of these books, please let me know. I would love to hear that. Let me know what your favorite book or books were that you read in the month of July. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. Thank you for watching this, and until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?